Today is Tuesday, October 14th. We'll tell you what President Trump is calling a historic dawn in the Middle East and what issues still need to be worked out before the war in Gaza can come to a permanent end. Also, ripple effects from the government shutdown, as there doesn't seem to be much interest from either party to cross the aisle and make a deal. Plus, there was a, let's just say, unique protest in Portland. What to know about the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and where in the world it's still the year 2018. Those stories and even more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. All of the Israeli hostages who have been held captive in Gaza for the last 2 years are now free. Hamas released the 20 living hostages, as well as the remains of some of those who died in captivity. Videos of emotional reunions between family members have circulated online. Israel also released nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners as part of a ceasefire brokered by the U.S. President Trump visited the Middle East in celebration yesterday. He gave a speech to the Israeli parliament where he said, quote, "The skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace." The whole speech lasted over an hour, but did not stick to just the topic of a ceasefire. For example, at one point, he directly urged Israel's president to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was facing a criminal trial on charges like bribery. Trump also attended a summit in Egypt where more than a dozen world leaders praised him for his role in bringing a pause in the war that's led to tens of thousands of deaths and a humanitarian crisis. But leaders of Hamas and Israel were not there. And there's still a long ways to go before everyone can agree on long-lasting peace. Just some unanswered questions include whether the terror group Hamas will lay down its arms, who will pay to rebuild Gaza, who will govern it, and more. In the meantime, the fighting has come to at least a temporary pause. The Israeli military has withdrawn from many areas of Gaza, and the United Nations says real progress is being made in delivering aid. About 200 American troops are now in Israel monitoring the ceasefire. Stay tuned. We're barreling toward one of the longest shutdowns in American history. That's a direct quote from House Speaker Mike Johnson, who won't even call lawmakers back to talk about a deal, saying it's up to the Senate now to pass a funding extension, just as the House already did. The Senate is actually expected to vote on it again today, but it's expected to fail for an 8th time, since it doesn't address healthcare funds that Democrats are demanding. Lawmakers actually are not facing quite as much pressure to reopen the government by tomorrow. That's when roughly 1.5 million service members were expected to miss a paycheck, but over the weekend, the Defense Department, aka the War Department, announced it was able to move some funding around so America's 2 million service members will get paid on time this time. That's not the case for hundreds of thousands of other federal employees, though, who are either furloughed or working without pay. And last week, the White House started following through on its threat to lay off thousands of federal workers, with the education and health departments being hit especially hard. Vice President J.D. Vance says those job cuts will get deeper and more painful the longer the shutdown lasts. President Trump says he's going to be cutting only Democratic programs, but that the cuts will be permanent. Meanwhile, airport delays are growing since some workers like air traffic controllers are deciding not to work while they're not being guaranteed timely paychecks. Also, federal loans to small businesses are on hold. Some home sales can't close because the federal government is not issuing flood insurance policies. The Smithsonian museums, research centers, and the National Zoo are now closed. And those are just a few examples of how the shutdown is directly impacting Americans. To be continued. The Trump administration is still fighting the courts in hopes of being able to deploy troops in Democratic cities like Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois. Over the weekend, it faced another setback in Chicago when an appeals court told the White House it can keep federalized National Guard members in the state of Illinois, but cannot actually deploy them for now. Another federal appeals court could decide any day now whether to allow National Guard troops to deploy in Portland after a similar decision and emergency hearing last week. President Trump's team says federal forces are needed to control crime and protect federal agents like those carrying out immigration raids. But leaders in the cities say there's no need for troops, and they accuse the Trump administration of overstepping its authority. It's something protesters have also been saying, and over the weekend, there were some clashes between protesters and authorities. For example, near Chicago, protesters have been flooding an immigration and customs enforcement processing facility, and after several arrests over the last couple of weeks, new limits were put on protesters with new rules about the exact area and hours they can hold demonstrations. Separately, a video that circulated widely over the weekend showed a journalist with Chicago's WGN television station being physically restrained on the ground by law enforcement. Officials accused her of throwing objects at a Border Patrol car, but witnesses say she was just recording video. No charges have been filed. Meanwhile, in Portland, hundreds of protesters found a unique way to get their voices heard. They decided to take a bike ride, completely naked or nearly naked, for what they called an emergency edition of their annual tradition. They rode to an ICE facility where they joined hundreds of other protesters, calling for it to be shut down. Dozens of counter-protesters also showed up to express support for federal agents. Similar standoffs have been happening all around the country. A mass shooter targeted hundreds of people gathered for a high school alumni party over the weekend. It was happening at a bar on St. Helena Island in South Carolina, about an hour north of Savannah, Georgia. At least 4 people were killed and 20 others were hurt. And as of this morning, authorities have not announced any arrests or given any details about a possible suspect. It's also not clear exactly what circumstances led to the shooting. Flowers and candles have been placed outside the bar as a tribute to those who were shot. In Middle Tennessee, a rural community is mourning the loss of 16 people who died in a factory explosion. They were all inside a facility that makes ammunition and explosives when the blast happened on Friday, and there were no survivors. The explosion could be felt all over the area, even more than 20 miles away. And now the plant has basically turned to rubble. Authorities had to carry out smaller controlled explosions over the weekend to get rid of hazardous materials. Now they say the surrounding community is safe. It's still not clear exactly what caused the explosion, but local, state, and federal agencies like the FBI are investigating. The American East Coast is dealing with a powerful storm this morning. Already over the weekend, there were dozens of flood reports documented from Florida to Massachusetts. There were also reports of downed trees from high winds. Many flights were delayed or canceled, especially in New York and Boston, and the risks continue today. But by tomorrow, things are expected to mostly clear up, and much calmer weather is expected on the East Coast for the rest of this month. Meanwhile, the weather is getting a little more unsettled on the West Coast, with widespread heavy rain in California and heavy early-season snow expected in the mountains. We have more news for you ahead in just a moment, but first, I'm excited to tell you about our new sponsor, Calm. Have you ever felt like you're just constantly told to be better? A better parent, a better partner, a better worker, a better version of ourselves. It can honestly be exhausting. I used to think I just needed to try harder at everything. But the ironic thing is, when I finally stopped putting all that pressure on myself, that's when I actually did get better. My mindset is a huge part of that, and lately I've been loving the Calm app for helping me find the right mindset on a daily basis. Even just 5 to 10 minutes a day truly helps me release stress, slow down, find gratitude, and it absolutely makes a huge difference in how I show up for both myself and the people around me. I love it most for short guided meditations, but I also reach for it when I'm having trouble sleeping or just need a boost of motivation in my day, since there are sleep stories, expert talks, calming music, and more. And I'm not the only one that thinks Calm is so great. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation. Calm your mind, change your life, truly. Calm has an exclusive offer just for listeners of our show. You can get 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/newsworthy. Go to calm.com/newsworthy for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. calm.com/newsworthy. Now, back to the news. This year's Nobel Peace Prize was given to an opposition leader from Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado was honored for building a powerful social movement that's arguably become the most significant threat to Venezuela's long-standing authoritarian regime. The United Nations welcomed the award to Machado as a recognition of the Venezuelan people's clear desire for free and fair elections. Machado dedicated the award in part to President Trump, who insisted he deserved it, especially after the breakthrough in talks to end the Gaza war. Machado mentioned how Trump supports her cause, too, as the U.S. is one of the countries that doesn't recognize Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's government as legitimate. And Machado supports the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean. The Peace Prize is worth about $1.2 million. Several key importers are now scrambling with even more new tariffs taking effect. On Friday, the U.S. government announced extra tariffs on certain Chinese-made machinery that can be key to the supply chain. So the new tariff rate can be as high as 270%. Plus, the U.S. has changed the fee structure for vehicle carriers that bring cars, farm equipment, and other heavy machinery to American shores. And today, new port fees go into effect for Chinese-made freight vessels. China recently announced new counter tariffs, too. But U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says there's been a lot of communication with China over trade the last few days, and President Trump is still expected to meet with the Chinese president later this month. Hollywood is paying its respects to an Oscar-winning star who's been called one of the most singular actors of a generation. We're talking about Diane Keaton, who's known for Annie Hall, The Godfather, The First Wives Club, Father of the Bride, and much more. Keaton was 79 when she died over the weekend. Reports say her health had suddenly declined. The news was met with shock around the world and tributes from friends, fans, and colleagues. For example, Francis Ford Coppola said, quote, "Everything about Diane was creativity personified." Another filmmaker, Nancy Meyers, called Keaton a, quote, "brilliant actress who time and time again laid herself bare to tell our stories." Other tributes have come in from Goldie Hawn, Steve Martin, Robert De Niro, Bette Midler, Leonardo DiCaprio, and many more. The Las Vegas Aces are WNBA champions again. The Aces won their third title in 4 seasons over the weekend. This time they did it in the finals by beating the Phoenix Mercury in a 4-game sweep. And they sealed it with a 97-86 win on Friday. Once again, the team was led by center Asia Wilson, who actually set a new scoring record for a single finals series. She was honored as the finals MVP and the regular season MVP. The whole team will be celebrated this Friday at a championship parade in Las Vegas. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this episode is sponsored by Skims. Every time I get a new t-shirt from Skims, I'm more and more impressed. Lately, I've been living in the Skims boyfriend t-shirt, and I love it. It's oversized and so soft. It's the kind of shirt that makes you feel really comfortable and relaxed, yet still somehow put together. I can throw it on with jeans or tuck it into shorts, and it always looks chic without even trying. And then there's the cotton jersey t-shirt, basically the perfect counterpart. It's definitely more form-fitting and so flattering, which makes it my go-to when I want something simple but polished. I have both the short sleeve and long sleeve versions of this one, which are perfect for this transition into fall as the weather changes, to both wear on their own or for layering. Every Skims tee I've tried has that same amazingly soft premium feel. They're well made, they wash beautifully, and they just fit right. Shop my favorite t-shirts now at skims.com/newsworthy. After you place your order, be sure to let them know we sent you. Select podcast in the survey and choose our show from the drop-down menu that follows. That's skims.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. And today's trivia question is, which animal gets smarter in the fall? Listen again next Tuesday for the answer and explanation. As for last week's trivia question, where in the world is it still 2018? The answer is Ethiopia. And that's because Ethiopia follows its own calendar that's comprised of 13 months instead of 12. For the rest of the world that uses the Gregorian calendar, there's now a difference of about 7.5 years. The country entered the year 2018 on the day the rest of us recognized as September 11th, 2025. Granted, these days, Ethiopians are aware that time and dates are different in the rest of the world, so many of them end up keeping track of both systems, each for different purposes. Thank you so much for joining us to get caught up on the news today. As always, we'll be back tomorrow with the latest to know. Until then, have a great day.